What's up, guys? Static in the Attic. I remember hearing a long time ago that the tomb of St. Peter is about 40 feet below modern day St. Peter's Basilica. And I remember thinking that that was really weird. This was a long time before concept of mudflood or, you know, the grand solar minimum, climate shifts, whatever. So I got to digging into this, and I'm just going to put it this way. According to one of the archaeologists that is currently excavating, he says that within the ancient city walls of Rome, for every single building that you see at street level today, all of these magnificent buildings and all of this magnificent architecture, he says that underneath every one of those is the foundations of an ancient building. He says underneath every one of them, they are finding so much stuff. They've actually got a map carved in marble of the ancient Rome street layout. They've only got about 10%. Let me just start here with this article. A sinkhole in the center of Rome reveals stones from the year 25 BC. A giant sinkhole opened up in the piazza just outside of Rome's Pantheon last month, revealing stones that date back to around 27 to 25 BC. They got it within 2 years. The sinkhole that opened up in the Piazza del Rotunda on April 27th is about 10 square feet and about 8 feet deep. 7 slabs of the travertine rock that were part of the original paving when the Pantheon was built were exposed below the cobblestone that Rome is known for today. Sinkholes are not altogether a rare occurrence in Rome. For about the past 100 years, they have been opening up across the city, but within the past decade or so, the number of sinkholes tripled. In 2008, a record-breaking 175 sinkholes opened up across the city. So in the last couple years, the bottom's just been falling out of the place, and they're finding all of this stuff that's buried down here. Now let's go back to St. Peter's Basilica, this magnificent, opulent piece of artwork that you're seeing here. This is what's on, the modern street level there. Guys, some of these places go down 2 stories below the ground. And down on the second story below ground is a Roman house, a Roman warehouse, an alleyway, a temple of Mithras. I mean, this place has seen some heavy mud flooding going on. So below modern St. Peter's Basilica is what's known as the Vatican Necropolis. And this was a huge open air cemetery and mausoleum. This wasn't crypts. This used to be open air, ground level. The Vatican Necropolis lies under the Vatican City at a depth varying between 5 and 12 meters, so almost 40 feet below modern level. The Vatican-sponsored archaeological excavations, also known by their Italian name scavi, under St. Peter's in the years 1940 to 1949, which revealed parts of a necropolis dating to imperial times. The work was undertaken at the request of Pope Pius XI, who wished to be buried as close to as possible to Peter the Apostle. Necropolis was not originally one of the catacombs of Rome, but an open-air cemetery with tombs and mausolea. So, yeah, it was ground level. Now, here's where things get fun. The Vatican Necropolis is not to be confused with the Vatican Grottos, the latter of which resulted from the construction of St. Peter's Church and is located on the ground level of Old Constantinian Basilica. So they've got the Vatican Grottos at the same level as what's also known the Constantinian Basilica or Old St. Peter's Basilica. And when you look at it, it says that it was a building that stood from the 4th to 16th centuries, where the new St. Peter Basilica stands today in Vatican City. An old St. Peter's Basilica was built over the historical site of the Circus of Nero. Is anybody getting confused about the levels here yet? So they've got some drawings of what they think the buried Circus of Nero looked like here. And it says that there was a nearby Roman cemetery, the Via Cornelia, that ran parallel with the north side of the circus. And its course can be traced with precision, for pagan tombs have been discovered at various times along its edge. So 40 feet below this big, huge modern church with the modern effigy to St. Peter lies the actual tomb of St. Peter, the whole Vatican necropolis. And I don't know if that is on top of Nero's circus or if that is the same level. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. It nowhere gives a real clear explanation for this part. It says that Old St. Peter's Basilica was erected by Constantine over the site of St. Peter's tomb using some of the existing structure of the Circus of Nero. Now, Constantine attended the Council of Nicaea. That was 325 AD. The basilica was sited so that the asp was centered on St. Peter's tomb, now beneath the high altar in the current St. Peter's Basilica. The circus itself was already abandoned by the middle of the 2nd century AD, when the area was partitioned and given in concession to private individuals for the construction of tombs belonging to the necropolis. However, it seems that most of the ruins of the circus survived until 1450, when they were finally destroyed by the construction of the new St. Peter's Basilica. So right here this just sounds weird to me, right here in the center of, what is modern day Rome, where Vatican City is, I guess the ruins of the ancient circus were there till 1450. Now, they talk a really good game with these precise dates that they're giving, but let's get down to what they're calling facts and the brass tacks of this. St. Peter's tomb was discovered beneath St. Peter's Basilica in the 1940s, around the time of World War II, when the Vatican commissioned excavations to be carried out there before Pope Pius XI was set to be buried in the space. Long presumed to be the final resting place of St. Peter, it was presumed that there wasn't much on the scabby beneath St. Peter's. What archaeologists found, however, was a burial ground, aka a necropolis, dating all the way back to the 4th century. Now, this is how they do the dating on this. They found the temple of Emperor Constantine. It says the temple, indicating that they knew about the temple of Emperor Constantine, but didn't know where it was at, is kind of the way that reads. Who had ruled at the time, and a spot of ancient graffiti that translated as "Peter is here." So somebody just scratched into the wall, "Peter is here." And they found the temple of Emperor Constantine, so naturally he must have built all this. But Constantine is credited with building Old St. Peter's Basilica on top of the ancient Circus of Nero. Now, I couldn't find any information on what happened to Old St. Peter's Basilica. It just says that new modern day St. Peter's Basilica construction started in 1508, and that some of the ruins of the ancient Circus of Nero could still be seen until 1450. So the time frame we're talking about, 1415 to 1500, somewhere around there, is about 100 years after all of the catastrophes. So this was enough time for civilization to reboot, because in the 14th century, that's when you saw all of, that was the height of the wolf minimum, all of the volcanoes, all of the earthquakes. See my other videos if you're new to this channel, documented this all very well. Massive droughts, massive famines, massive flooding, the Black Death. And I mean, half of the population of the world got wiped out. I mean, just wrap your head around that. Half the people in the world died in the 14th century. So this is society rebuilding itself after major cataclysms came through. It took a couple generations to even, get the manpower back to even do anything. Everybody's familiar with the famous obelisk that's right in the center of modern St. Peter's Square. Now, they say that this obelisk at the center of Nero's Circus spine always remained standing until it was re-erected in St. Peter's Square in the 16th century by architect Domenico Fontana. The obelisk was originally brought to Rome by Caligula. Caligula was known as the Mad Emperor, just crazy, ruthless guy. His time frame was just after the crucifixion of Christ, right around like 37 BC or AD. So I just want you to wrap your head around this. In 37 AD, they had the ships in the engineering capacity to sail over to Egypt, pick up this big, huge obelisk, sail it over to Rome, erect it in Nero's Circus. Evidently, it lasted through whatever catastrophes happened there. If you look at the proximity between the Tiber River there, this looks like it's in a floodplain. I mean, that could have been the what actually happened in this area was the valley got majorly flooded and it all got buried in. Now, I have accounts of a Chinese traveler that visited Rome in this time frame, and he made comments about the postal system there and how good it was. Now, a postal system would indicate that each and every individual, or most individuals like today, were literate and could write. So that in 37, around that time frame, around the time of Christ, they had engineering capacity, abilities to travel the Mediterranean at will, pick up whatever cargo they wanted, engineering capacity to erect this huge obelisk. They had a postal system, writing things back and forth and everything. But from 500 AD to around 1300 AD, we have almost zero accounts, written accounts of anything. We've got a few monks. And another very peculiar thing about that time frame is that there is no invention, there is no progress in technology that is noteworthy. They attribute a few siege engines and the crossbow to this period, but there is no technology. If you study the ancient Greeks, I mean, they were working with steam motors, all kinds of experimentation from that time period. But then from 500 AD to 1300 AD, we got almost nothing. And then 500 AD and 1300 AD are both attributed with a big comet in the sky, massive earthquakes, volcanoes, flooding, drought, famine, earthquakes. I mean, identical events. Even down to the number of casualties. They say that 50 million people died in each one of these events, or roughly half of the European population. I just find all that very strange. Anyway, let's just stick with Rome here on this one. So that's just what's under the Vatican up there. I don't feel like editing a 2-hour video for the next week with all the information I got here, so I'm just going to break this into chunks. Let's go over the lay of land here, and then I'll do a little music montage of some of the beautiful architecture that is there in Rome to play you guys out on this one. So Vatican looks like it's down in the floodplain. I could totally see that being wiped out by a major flood coming through, especially when you look at the evidence that it was being rebuilt 1450 to 1500, around that time frame. This would have been just enough time for society to recover from the catastrophes of the 14th century. Now, the Vatican is way outside of the Servian Wall, the ancient city walls of Rome. The ancient city of Rome was mostly built on top of the 7 hills here. Tradition holds that Romulus and Remus founded the original city on the Palatine Hill in 753 BC, and that the 7 hills were first occupied by small settlements that were not grouped. The city of Rome thus came into being as these separate settlements acted as a group, draining the marshy valleys between them and turning them into markets, Later in the early 4th century BC, the Servian walls were constructed to protect the 7 hills. So they had their houses up on the hills. They drained out the marshy areas down below and set up their markets. On Capitoline Hill, there still stands this pretty cool statue depicting the legend of Romulus and Remus, who were suckled by a she-wolf and went on to become the founders of Rome. According to the legend, when King Numitor, grandfather of the twins, was overthrown by his brother, the usurper ordered them to be cast into the Tiber River. They were rescued by a she-wolf who carried them until a herdsman, Faustulus, found and raised them. They say this statue was long thought to be an Etruscan work of the 5th century BC, with the twins added in the late 15th century AD. Just an interesting little tidbit there. And it looks a lot to me like Capitoline Hill there in ancient Rome is where we get the origins of the name of our modern Capitol Hill, where our modern emperor and his cronies all stayed and dictate our lives with increasing tyranny. If I believed all the crap they were putting out right now, I'd probably put a mask on to hide my shame as well. But I digress. 5 to 12 meters, almost 40 feet underneath modern Vatican City, lies the necropolis of where St. Peter was evidently buried. I mean, they had some graffiti there, and it was rumored to be his grave, so evidently that's his grave. And evidently somewhere in the mix down there are the ruins of the ancient Circus of Nero, where the obelisk that is currently in St. Peter's Square used to reside, just down on a different ground level. Anyway, that's it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. There's a lot more about Rome. I'm just going to have to break it up. But I will play you guys out with some beautiful images because this place is absolutely extraordinary. I'd love to go there someday and not fall in a sinkhole that they keep seeming to pop up everywhere. Enjoy the images here. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves out there. Static out.